We're in chapter 11, and we have to cover the whole chapter. It's called A World of States. And it's got a picture on page 424. What's that all about? On page 425, it shows all of these countries, and on page 424, it just shows Canada, United States, but it doesn't have all the states within the state. Oh, it's just talking about these countries. And it says on page 424, the age of the world states the current political partitioning of the world is very recent. In many states, citizens remember the day their country achieved independence. Do you remember the day your country achieved independence?
No.
Yes.
You weren't here then.
No.
Well, I found some cool stuff on the internet. Some videos that I'm going to show you today that have to
Videos of when we
do.
became independent?
So look at this
That's
map
impressive.
on page 424 and 425. Look at this map while you're watching this video. And what is this video called? The History of the World. That's what it says. The History of the World.
First edition.
The History of the World. Every year. I think this is the one I'm looking for here. The History of the World every year, Ollie By.
You probably would have the map on there, it's too outdated.
The History of the World every year. This is 19 minutes long.
Woohoo!
We're not going to watch the whole 19 minutes. I think I put
What?
this up on.
I like really.
You like videos?
I like long.
Okay.
videos.
If you're going to see the whole history of the world in 19 minutes, it's going to wear you out. I mean, watching this stuff just wore me out. So I uploaded it to my favorite Twitter place. Have any of you been there?
Yeah.
CBC Geography.
What's
Yeah, I
Twitter?
get a notification every time you tweet.
You do. Every
Yeah.
time I add something, it
Yeah.
tells you. So
That's actually fun.
you can go to Twitter and look at this again and again and again. Or you can just Google the history of the world and then type in every year. I found the history of Europe every year, the history of Saudi Arabia every year, the history of Africa every year, the history of Southeast Asia, the history of the Middle East. I mean, they're all out there. And there's no time to watch them all. So I'm going to show you some highlights from the history of the world every year. And I'll show you how I'm going to highlight it here. It says it's 19 minutes long.
More.
No, I love the music.
Oh, it's about the world, not just Egypt.
Do you see what year it is? Do you see the year over here?
Yes. Very old.
160,000 BC. Forget that. I'm going to save myself some time here. We're just going to
Wait, no, I'm curious.
scroll up here.
No, you know how to do that. Dang, he's doing
What's the gray?
Well, we're up to 2,150 BC.
What's the colors?
See those colors off to the right? Can you see them?
it. Yeah.
They're not showing up very well, are they?
No.
See them right over here? That's why you'll have to go look at it again on your own. See down here, it's showing the population of the world. I don't know how they know that since there wasn't a census back then. But at least you're kind of looking at some of the countries, some of the states,
Why is
the
there no
areas
Native
that were
Americans?
considered nations.
Did you just ask if there were no Americans?
Native Americans.
No one knew
Okay.
that existed at this time period.
Okay, but now we do, so when
Let's
they put
pick up
people
Oh,
the
there-
pace a little bit.
Because we couldn't document any of it.
Let's go up
Oh,
here
they're just going
to
by what they know.
Yeah.
Oh.
800
How are they
years.
with the world population? They don't know the world population.
800 years before Christ.
So why don't they guess that there's Native Americans?
I don't know.
It's okay. Watch what's happening.
You told me. You
Okay,
told
let's move up another
Say
1,000
it's
years. Let's move on up here.
Technically, everything is false except for the Bible.
We're 300 years before Christ.
Facts. Physics are real.
Yeah, but they also claim that
See the colors changing?
What?
They also claim that there's a Big Bang Theory, and that's clearly false.
That's not physics, that's a Big Bang theory.
I don't think I need that music. They're not telling me anything. See how the colors are changing? That means these are the changes that are going on in the world in terms of the. See, this chapter is called A World of States, but when it says a world of states, like we're the United States. And so these are all of these, like this would be the Han state, the India state. You follow that? This would be the whatever state, Scythian state. You see that? That's where this would be the Egyptian state. So we think of states like Oklahoma, Kansas, that kind of thing, but think of it like we're the United States. And that's what this chapter is about. And it says on page 424 and 425, the ages of the world states, the current political partitioning of the world, and that's what this is, political partitioning of the world. And you see how it changes? Because somebody invades another country and takes over, and then somebody dies a few years later and somebody else takes over, and it just keeps changing. What are we up to? The year 160?
Who the heck is
We
Zion
just
Day?
crossed the year. See the year over there? We're now up to the year 200. And this is what's happened.
Mr. Bonine, who is Zion Bay? Oh, never mind, they died.
Yeah, see, it's just like someone's there and then they die and they lose their kingdom to somebody else. Now we're up to what? Almost 300 years? The year 300?
All those people in Central America.
And now we're up to almost 400. We're not going to wait that long. Let's jump up here to 800. And see, there's Tibet and China. But see, you've read things about Tibet and China having their disagreements. And over here, here's France. And you see how these things are changing over here? We're almost up to 1,000, to the year 1,000, in what they call in this video the Common Era, or this is AD. We just crossed, we're almost to 1,000, and this is what the world looked like in terms of political divisions by countries, that we might call countries. if you think of the United States as a country by groups of states, political entities, this was the year 1000. Let's zoom ahead to 2000. No, we're not there yet.
Hey, look, there's Grand America.
Oh, come on. Let's zoom ahead to 2000. We're still not there. 1500. Okay, there's 1500. That might be something to look at. And see how when you're looking at this, you can just stop it
Well, I'm waiting for
and start it again.
Germany to take over the whole Europe.
What year did that happen?
No say.
And see, all this stuff's going on in Europe. Nothing's happening over here in the North and South America.
There's nobody there. Look,
Whoops!
you
Look at Russia. Russia starts growing. Whoa! And they just go. It starts from a little country in Moscow. Actually, starts in Kiev and then grows to Moscow, and then Russia just takes over. Now, see, you say Russia just took over all that. Well, what is that anyway? It's Siberia. I mean, it's like
Wasteland.
you're up there. It's like wasteland. Except what's underneath that wasteland?
Oil.
Oil. And guess what? The most recent discovery is
Coal.
gold. They found some gold over there. So Putin is saying, "Hey, I've got money to burn because the land all belongs to the state." So Putin's president, so he gets to decide how to spend it.
What's the yellow?
Wait for it. Wait for it.
Over here in South
What is it to
America,
purchase?
Yeah.
that's
Oh, yeah.
Brazil.
Like,
But now notice, okay, let me stop this for a minute since you asked about that. Come on, stop this thing for a minute.
oh, that's just part of America.
Oh, you can't see it. Okay, see
Where's
Spain?
Germany?
Look at Spain and Brazil, the same color, because Brazil was a Portuguese colony.
So yellow is Spain.
Well, yeah, yellow is Spanish.
Oh wow.
See, in Africa, Spanish colonies in Africa.
And then where does it return?
And then French. French is a little darker.
Oh.
French colonies.
Cuba.
Me familia.
So,
Cool.
yeah.
See?
Where does it return?
And see Canada and the United States.
I never saw Germany take over.
Soviet Union. That's part of what Germany did.
Dude, you should have done this video instead of
You didn't see Germany take over?
No.
Well, let's go back and watch it.
Oh, man.
Let's back this up to, what would that be? 19, what?
No mas.
Like 1930s.
Wait.
I think.
There it is, watch. 1940. It didn't last very long, did it?
Mm-mm.
No.
So it's not gonna, it's gonna go by rather quickly. Okay, if you want to take a closer look at Europe, there's the history of Europe every year. This is like the whole world, and then there's one on the history of Europe. Maybe since you're interested in that, let's go look at that one. Let's shut this one down for a minute, and let's go up here and type in.
What's the name of this video?
The history of the world every year.
The history of what? What is going on here? The history of Europe. Of Europe every year. That every year is where you'll get the video. Videos of the history of Europe every year. Let's see, which one are we going to look at? This one? Yeah. Maybe I should turn the volume back on. No. We don't need that music. So now, see, now they're showing a picture of Europe. And let's just run across here and come up here to a little later. What does that look like? What does that picture look like? In 250, the Roman Empire.
Yep.
In 650,
Oh, the Byzantine Empire.
yeah. And see how it shows it over here to the left? It shows which empire had the greatest population and how it shifts around. Like if you go watch this one on now, you know what? When I get home, I'll upload this one to my Twitter account, because when you're watching it, when you watch it go through, like the Byzantine Empire was down here and it keeps moving up. So I'll go ahead and upload that one. I'll make it a point to upload that one too. But we came to this because you wanted to see that time when Germany was going to take over the world.
Not true.
We're not there yet, but we're sure getting some. See how this is like focusing on Europe.
The Holy Roman Empire.
Let's see what we got here. The 1800s.
There's some Russian.
You know what? Maybe I'll let this go for a little while, because just to show you, in the 1800s, when here in America, we had a civil war in the 1850s. Okay, look what's going on in Europe during that time. See, there's 1880. See how big Germany is, and Austria-Hungary and France? Now watch what happens. Our Civil War didn't last very long, and we kind of get on with life, but look what happens in Europe. See, the USSR just grows over in that direction, and then Germany. There, did you see that little brief picture of Germany there?
Mm-hmm.
I'll pack it up for you.
That's probably
It's too far.
Yep, went too far. Went too far. Maybe I'll get over here.
Yeah, I think it's going.
Get ready to pause it. Get this stuff out of the way.
You can just hit the space bar to pause it.
I do?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. When we get there.
Okay, just wait like 40 years.
There. See 1917, what Germany's doing? In 1920, it's back. 1930, whoa, then whoa, 1942, whoa, just everywhere. And that's when Europe said what? In 1942, America, most powerful and richest nation on the face of the earth, come and help us. And guess what we said?
No.
It's not our problem. Handle it yourself, people. Then when did we decide to get involved in the war?
Isn't it when Germany threatened us?
They didn't just threaten us. What did they do?
The Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor.
And the Japanese and Germany were in it together. And Germany sunk some of our ships that were taking goods and people to England. And we said, and our government, our president said, that's it, folks. We're going over there and stop this. These people think they not only can attack Europe, they can attack anybody, and we're not going to wait till they come to our shore. We're going over there and stop this thing. And the Germans said, look at the way we've taken over Europe. What are these little pilgrims from America going to do? Does anyone know what happened when the pilgrims from America landed on the shore of Europe? The German soldier says, these Americans are crazy.
Yeah.
Yes.
They just keep coming at you no matter how much you shoot at them.
Well, they did kill a lot of us in their first landing.
Yes, they did. And you know what? I think all of us need to see See why some old people get a little bit out of shape when people disrespect the flag and disrespect America's history? I mean, we've got some bad stuff going on in America in our past, but let me tell you something. There's a whole bunch of people in America died so Europe could be free. And our history is that we ought to respect those people and respect what they did, because what happens when we click this back on? Germany's back to a tiny little place again. In fact, there's East and West Germany. And see, Russia comes in and says, oh, now we've got all this land, all these countries we can form as our border. And then now all of a sudden, 2010, Russia's gone. All this stuff that used to be part of Russia is now a bunch of countries that are free. Okay, let me click this back to wherever it was. I don't know how I got here. I just use computers. I don't know anything about them. Okay, so now we've looked at a history of the world. And you see how Europe has just experienced turmoil over and over again. I have to show you one. The history. Where is it? Down here? Okay, let's do the history of colonial America. (1497) See this? This is so cool. I've put this on my Twitter account so you can look at it. The history of colonial America, 1497 to 1763. When did we become an independent country from England?
Like 1776.
1776. So, were all of you taught about the 13 original colonies and our war with England for our freedom and how we became the United States of America? See, all of us have been taught that. I don't remember any place in my schooling where I was taught what I'm about to show you. Are you ready for this? And it's the history of colonial America, 1497, from the 1500s to 1760. You say, I didn't even know there was a history. I thought it was all just Indian territory till that happened. Watch this. And there, this YouTube video. I'm so glad I found these things. This is just really slick stuff.
How long is that one?
What is this one?
6 minutes, 17 seconds.
Oh,
You should let
whoa.
that play all the way through. Pause it a couple times if you need to.
Where do I turn on the volume?
No?
You have it
Move
muted.
your mouse on the screen.
Where? Here?
Yeah,
No,
over there.
to the left. You have it muted. Just click it.
To find a route to Japan.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That would later bring
No.
colonists and
Almost.
settlers, whose legacy lives on today in the names of cities,
Right.
states, streets, and rivers. John Cabot of England discovered Newfoundland and explored its coast, hoping to find a route to Japan. Juan Ponce de Leon of Spain explored the east coast of Florida.
Does that help if I turn it down a little bit?
Italian Giovanni di Verrazzano explored the Atlantic coast in search of a passage to the Indies. And Jacques Cartier of France sailed the St. Lawrence River to Montreal. Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto traveled the southeast from 1539 to 42, while his compatriot Francisco de Coronado searched the southwest and the southern Great Plains.
I remember Coronado. We studied him somewhere.
In 1565, the Spanish reversed a policy which barred colonization and founded St. Augustine, the first permanent settlement in America. The English founded their first colony at Roanoke in 1585, but it later disappeared without a trace. This failure suspended English colonial efforts until 1606, when the London Company was authorized to establish settlements. In 1607, they established Jamestown as the first permanent English settlement.
Ah, I remember that
The
one.
first permanent French settlement was founded by Samuel de Champlain at Quebec in 1608.
I didn't
Searching for
study
a
that.
northwest passage to Asia, English navigator Henry Hudson explored the Delaware Bay and New York Harbor. Across the continent, The Spanish set up Santa Fe in 1610 to serve as an administrative and missionary center. The New World became a haven from the Old. In search of religious freedom, the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth in 1620 and started the first English colony in New England. The Dutch were not to be left out. They established their first settlement at Port Orange in 1624.
I don't remember reading about those
now known
Dutch
as
people.
Albany, New York. And they also made the most famous acquisition of all, purchasing Manhattan Island to found New Amsterdam. Sweden also joined in, starting the first Swedish colony at Fort Christina, now Wilmington, Delaware. By 1650, the Swedish in New Sweden, the Dutch in New Netherlands, and the British in Virginia and New England were firmly established in the Mid-Atlantic region. But as each colony expanded, besides existing European rivalries, tensions developed that soon brought the colonies in conflict. During the First Anglo-Dutch War, the English seized the Dutch outpost of Fort Good Hope. 2 years later, the Dutch took control of the Delaware Valley from Sweden. The English regarded New Amsterdam as blocking their westward expansion, so they decided to take it. Thus,
I didn't
Governor
read.
Peter
Did you
Stuyvesant
read that in your
surrendered
history books anywhere?
1664, and the British renamed the city New York, in honor of the Duke of York, brother of King Charles II. By the end of 1664, 3 European powers remained in North America. The British controlled most of the eastern seaboard and a large region north. The French had settlements from Quebec to Montreal and influence over the interior. And Spain had claim over Florida and the Southwest, but with few settlements. The next century would see greater expansion and exploration. The English settled in Carolina at Charleston in 1670, while the French explored the interior. Marquette and Joliet traveled to central Mississippi in 1673. Lewis Hennepin, the upper Mississippi area in 1680. And LaSalle descended the Great River to the Gulf of Mexico, claiming the entire Mississippi watershed in the name of France, and naming it Louisiana, after King Louis XIV. After receiving a charter for Pennsylvania, William Penn established Philadelphia in 1682. Colonization increased. The Spanish founded Pensacola in Florida in 1698. The French built a mission at Cahokia, the first permanent settlement in Louisiana. And the British began to clear the interior and expand. The Spanish built in the southwest. Albuquerque was founded in 1698. The French set up Mobile, capital of Louisiana, until 1720, and Natchitoches, the oldest permanent settlement in present-day Louisiana. Responding to French development, Spanish missions were established in Nacogdoches, Texas, and then San Antonio. In 1718, New Orleans was founded due to its location on the Mississippi near the Gulf of Mexico. The English expanded south with the arrival of settlers in Savannah, Georgia in 1733. By 1754, British and French interests began to compete as colonists vied for territory. British influence extended along the eastern seaboard, from Nova Scotia to Georgia and as far west as the Appalachian Mountains, with an area around the Hudson Bay. The French claimed eastern Canada and Louisiana territory, and the Spanish were widely scattered over Florida, Texas, and the far southwest.
Look at all that French territory. Did you know the French had that much of our country?
A fight started over the Ohio River Valley. An English fort built at what is now Pittsburgh was taken over by the French. A contingent, under George Washington, built Fort Necessity nearby, but was ousted in July of 1754. It was the beginning of the French and Indian War. The British capture of Quebec in 1759, and the French surrender of Montreal in 1760, seriously eroded French resistance. Concerned that a British victory would upset the balance of power, Spain joined the war against Britain in 1762. But Spain did not tilt the balance. Britain prevailed, and the Treaty of Paris of 1763, which ended the war, was much in its favor.
Did you hear? Did you know we had that much war going on back here in our country between all these European countries?
Britain gained all of North America east of the Mississippi River, including Canada and Florida. To compensate Spain for the loss of Florida, France ceded all its territory west of the Mississippi. The Indians had been a force in the war, especially with the raids on the frontier. To placate the Indians, the British Parliament passed the Proclamation of 1763, which forbid colonial advancement west of the Appalachian Divide.
Did you hear that? The British said the colonists have to stay on the east side of the Appalachian Mountains. because we've made peace with the Spanish and the French, and that's our agreement with them.
Resented by colonists eager to move west, this decree was the first of many acts to lead to the American Revolution.
What did America think about that? Not. Uh-oh.
A colony is a place that's settled by a group
Now,
of
what
people
did I do?
outside their home country, belongs to or is ruled by that home country.
Sound like DJ Khaled at first.
Sounds like
4 centuries ago, the Americas were a new world race.
Let's move it on up here and see what's going on.
With an area around the Hudson Bay. The French claimed eastern Canada and Louisiana territory, and the Spanish were widely scattered over Florida, Texas, and the far southwest. A fight started over the Ohio River Valley. An English fort built at what is now Pittsburgh was taken over by the French, like a seriously eroded French resistance. Concerned that a British victory would upset the balance of power, Spain joined the war against Britain in 1762. But Spain did not tilt the balance. Britain prevailed, and the Treaty of Paris of 1763, which ended the war, was much in its favor. Britain gained all of North America east of the Mississippi River, including Canada and Florida. To compensate Spain for the loss of Florida, France ceded all its territory west of the Mississippi. The Indians had been a force in the war, especially with their raids on the frontier. To placate the Indians, the British Parliament passed the Proclamation of 1763, which forbid colonial advancement west of the Appalachian Divide. Resented by colonists eager to move west, this decree was the first of many acts to lead to the American Revolution.
Oh, that's why I quit. They were at the end.
A colony is a place that's settled by a group of...
Okay. So let's turn in our books to page 426 and talk about the development of the idea of a nation state. And it says on the left-hand column, under the idea of a nation state, it says, a state is a territory on a map. That's the United States of America. A nation is a cultural entity. What do all of the United States of America have in common culturally?
Speak English.
We speak English. And do we speak British English?
Mm-mm.
Does anyone know why we don't speak British English? You can thank Noah Webster for that. You go, what? Noah Webster?
Didn't he write the dictionary?
Yeah, Webster's dictionary. Noah Webster wrote a dictionary, and he said, our nation needs its own English language dictionary because our English is different from the English in Britain. Not only in terms of the way we say things, but there's a bunch of stuff in America that they don't have in Britain that we need words for. And he wrote the English dictionary for the United States. And, okay, now I've already told you when we talked about our language backgrounds, I'm fluent in Oklahomanese.
Mm-hmm.
That's why when I was in England and I tried to get a phone number from the operator, she couldn't understand my English and I couldn't understand hers. And finally she was frustrated and I said, I'm sorry, I don't speak English, I'm from the United States. And then she started laughing. Because the English do think that we really butcher the King's language, that we do a terrible thing to the English language. And we would say, that's our nation. You follow? So we've got this common language. What else do we have in common that makes us a nation? What's our cultural, what defines us as a culture?
Hamburgers.
Hamburgers?
Just kidding. Something like that.
Did they start here?
Probably not.
I think hamburger sounds like something from Germany.
That's what my dad says. It's like, That's all they eat in the United States: hamburgers and hot dogs.
Okay, hamburgers and hot dogs. Maybe you could say we're the home of the hot dog.
Frankfurters.
Frankfurters. That's from Germany too, isn't it? Do we have any foods that are distinctly our national culture, Anna?
Potato chips were invented here.
Okay.
Corn.
No.
I thought corn was first from America.
Well, was it?
I think China
Actually,
had some.
I
Or was it
No.
South America?
I think the
Some
chapter that talked about food said it started someplace else.
I think
Oh,
like
maybe
the
not.
popcorn started here, but other corn was maybe South America.
What about mashed potatoes and gravy?
Okay, let's get beyond food to something else that our nation has. We have this common language. Okay, we do have some common foods, don't we? But do we have anything else that makes us a culturally a nation? You can't think of anything?
Our love of freedom.
What?
Religious
Or-
freedom.
What?
I don't know how to put it, but like the fact that we have so many ethnicities.
Oh.
Okay.
The melting pot.
Okay. Now, did someone say melting pot?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, did your history books ever talk to you about America is a melting pot for the world? That people from all nations come to here. They go to the common public school and learn all of this stuff that makes us a culture. And then at the end of their schooling time, they become citizens of the United States. And they reach the age where someone had just suggested recently in Congress that we lower the voting age to 16.
What? 16-year-olds are not mature enough. Believe me.
So
It would help the Democrats.
So do you understand what's one of the characteristics that makes us, that culturally makes us the nation we are? You say, well, other countries vote too. Do they have the selection in voting that we have in this country? Some countries do, but those countries that have that have probably modeled their government after ours. They've borrowed ideas from us because they like our brand of democracy. Do you guys know that the government in America is different than it was in the Roman Empire or any of those European countries? It wasn't patterned after any of them. It was called a great experiment. And a lot of the rest of the world is still watching to see if our cultural political experiment will really work. Does anyone know what's unique about our cultural political experiment?
There's
What
not-
kind of government do we have?
Limited.
A what?
Limited government.
A limited government. We put limits on the people in power, don't we? Have you heard the phrase checks and balances?
Yes.
Have you heard the phrase the rule of law? And that nobody is above the law? No matter how powerful they are? That's part of our culture. That's part of what makes us the United States that we are, because we have this Constitution that we embrace as a nation and that we try to pass on to the next generation, to say we are governed by constitutional law, not by the whims of somebody in power. And other countries, they just, the people in power just change their constitution to fit their own personal preferences. And you can't do that here. And when you talk about limited government, we limit how long someone can be president. No matter how much we don't like the person who's the president, what can you always say in America, in the United States? They won't serve more than 8 years because that's the maximum they can be in Washington. And some of them don't get to serve more than 4 because the people say, sorry, you had 4 years to do something and we didn't like the way you did it, so you don't get to go back for 4 more years. But even if somebody gets reelected, they still can't go back for a 3rd term. That's a distinctive of our culture. Now, it didn't start out that way, but that's part of that our checks and balances, our limited government, is part of what makes us the culture of our nation. And if you don't like the way things are being run in your city government or your county government, you can run for office, right? If you meet the age qualifications and get elected and change the way things are done. Some nation, it says on page 426, some nations define themselves in exclusive terms based on ethnicity or race, and you could add to that, or religion. The Croatian define themselves as Catholic. The Japanese are defined as members of the Yamato people, who are nominally Shinto Buddhist. Say, well, aren't we a Christian nation? If we were a Christian nation, we would probably require everyone who's an elected official in America to be what?
Christian.
Christian. Do we require that?
No.
No. Do we embrace Christian values?
Used to.
Do we used to embrace them more than we do now. But what are some of the big ticket values in our culture today? Are there any big ticket values? It's okay to lie to get your children into the best college.
It's not.
No. What is part of our culture? Lying is out of bounds. I mean, were any of you ever told this? Tell the truth, even if it gets you in trouble. Better to tell the truth and suffer the consequences than to lie. If you tell a lie, you've lost your integrity. Now, I'm going to make a statement here that I read in doing some research years ago that I thought was very interesting. The Russians love signing treaties with America.
Why?
Because Americans believe in keeping their word. And, you want to finish the sentence? Russians don't. When the wall came down in Russia, I was so intrigued with what happened when Russia opened up that I was reading all kinds of stuff about it at the time it happened. Some car dealers in America said, here's a brand new market. So they enlisted some people in Russia to be automobile dealers. They put cars on ships and sent them to Russia. And the guy in Russia unloaded the cars and sold them and put the money in his pocket. And when the guy from America called and said, where's the money for the cars? He said, as soon as I sell them, I'll send it to you. And the guy from America said, okay. And the guy from Russia hung up the phone and said, crazy Americans. They ship you a car, tell you to sell it, and then send them the money for it. Who's going to do that? If I don't have to pay for it before I get it, I sell it and keep all the money. Too bad for the American. He ought to know that's the way we do business here. Some Russian immigrants in California were arrested for falsifying their welfare report. They said they had 12 children when they only had 2. And when they got arrested, somebody said, "What were you thinking?" And they said, "Nobody checks." If nobody checks to verify how many children you have, what would be the logical thing to do? Declare more children so you get more money. But that wouldn't be honest. So who's honest? Where do you go in the world to find honest people? And what did we say? In America. You say, no, you Americans are honest. That's why we're here taking advantage of you. So you understand that now, where did we get that honesty thing? Doesn't that come from our Judeo-Christian background? What's one of the 10 Commandments?
Don't lie.
Thou shalt not lie. What's another one of the 10 Commandments that's part of our culture in our country? Thou shalt not take God's name in vain? No, we don't respect that one anymore, do we? Thou shalt not commit adultery? Nope, that one doesn't apply. Is there any others that we're still embracing?
Thou shalt not murder.
Thou shalt not murder.
Some people murder.
But if you do,
Held against the law.
you're held accountable for it. Whereas, one of the videos I was watching that talked about the history of Egypt, it talks about one of the most powerful ladies in Egypt was one of the greatest murderers of Egypt. That's also true in England and Russia, wasn't it, at one time? See, it's like, no. I mean, do you understand if we practiced that kind of stuff that was done historically in America, if you didn't like the person who was running against you for office, you would just hire someone to kill him. It's like, no, we don't operate like that. We embrace, you respect life, and you don't murder people. Is there another one that we embrace? And again, we borrowed that from Judeo-Christian ethic. Think of the 10 Commandments. Is there another one in there that we embrace? Thou shalt not commit adultery? Nope, that one's been thrown out the window. So it used to be we embrace more of them than we do now, but do we still embrace as a culture some of those Judeo-Christian values? What about stealing? You steal, you go to jail, or you have to make restitution. There's a consequence to that because it's wrong to steal. Part of what makes America's economy work is honesty and not stealing. I mean, if you want to borrow money from a bank to build a house, you go to the bank and apply for a loan, and they check out your credit rating and they say, yep, he's an honest person. He's done business with other people and they'll vouch for him. So I'll loan him the money to build his house. And they don't come and check on you. Oh wait, they didn't used to come and check on you. They just gave you the money and you went out and bought lumber and built a house. And then when you're finished with the house, the bank has a mortgage on the house. So if you don't make your payments for the lumber, they take your house. And then all of a sudden, a few years ago, I was preaching in a church out in Kansas, and the guy who took me home for lunch, I always asked, so what do you do for a living? He said, I work for the bank. And I said, oh, what do you do for the bank? He said, I drive around all day checking to make sure that the builders who are borrowing money to build houses are actually spending the money on building houses. So this honesty thing has started to weaken, hasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've actually heard people say, the truth doesn't matter. You say whatever you have to say to get elected. Whoa, wait a minute. Wow, and you see, all of a sudden part of our culture is being threatened. And in the process of doing that, our nation is losing some of its strength from what it had in the past. But see, other nations would say, well, you're not that old anyway. You were founded in 1776. So in 1976, you were 200 years old. Our country's 2,000 years old. You follow what they're saying from people over in Europe? That you guys have a long ways to go to prove that you can make this thing work. So you have to think of the culture and what they share. And then say, what is it we share that makes us a great nation? And I suppose the Bill of Rights would be one of the things that we share. The Constitution, the checks and balances in our government, the limits on government. And it talks here on page 426 and 427 about the nation-state idea. But apart from people theorizing about the nature-state idea, can you see from these videos I just had you look at, can you see from those videos how most nation-states grow around a culture, don't they? And around a group of people? Now, granted, when we took that look at Germany and how it grew and shrank and grew and shrank, okay, it grew because a few people decided to expand our horizons, and then it shrunk when those people were stopped from mistreating other people. This is the same with Russia. Russia's expanded and shrunk. And interesting enough, when I looked at the video on the history of Europe, it was interesting to see how Russia and Poland, how sometimes Poland has pushed against Russia, and you can simply see, but all of it kind of has to do with the culture of a group of people. And then it talks on page 429 about the collapse of empires, and those videos really show how empires grow and empires collapse. And if you go on Google a history of America, of Africa, every year, you'll see pictures of how all of these little separate countries were formed. And some of these countries are made up of a group of one tribe, and some of them are made up of more than one culture or one tribe of people. But I think this chapter talks about it a little bit, that Yugoslavia and Bosnia, if you remember the trouble that we had over there, that's because somebody, mainly America, England, the NATO powers, decided how to carve up the boundaries and said, you people just have to learn to live together, whether you like each other or not. And eventually, Yugoslavia got to the place to where they said, nope, we're going to cut it in half and make two countries based on ethnic or cultural differences. And a lot of those even had to do with religious differences. On page 431, it talks about the British Empire. And you can again go to the Google the history of the British Empire and do it with every year, because every year will take you to those videos where you can see what's going on. The British Empire had a whole lot of, for a tiny little country, they sure expanded their horizons around the world. And on page 432, it shows remnants of empires. And it talks about the Commonwealth of Nations. Do you know anything about the Commonwealth of Nations? That little pink color? Do any of you know anything about the Commonwealth? Have you studied the Commonwealth of Nations anywhere?
What?
Those are nations that used to be a part of the British Empire, and eventually, this is interesting, they either, Britain said, you can rule yourself now, or the people said, you don't rule us anymore, Britain, like we did in America, but we still have a good relationship with Britain. So these are all countries that used to be controlled by Britain, but now they control themselves, but they still have a working relationship with Britain. Yes?
Puerto Rico is the Commonwealth.
Is a Commonwealth of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And what do we gain from Puerto Rico? And what does Puerto Rico gain from us? See on this map on page 432 where Puerto Rico is? Could that be a strategic military place if we ever needed to defend our country from people from Europe or Africa or South America. That's why we have some more. See on the left side of the United States, see Midway and Johnson Atoll and Kingman Reef. See where it says U.S. and Jarvis? See all that stuff that says U.S. on it? United States territories. Why do we have all these territories out here in the middle of the ocean? As a place to protect us from anyone attacking our border, we've got early warning signs out there all over the place. And what happened a few years ago when Russia decided to build a missile base in Cuba? Our president said, "Too close to America. Move your missile base out of here." And they did. Now, guess what Putin says about NATO countries in Europe and having missiles in Europe? Putin says, "Too close to Russia. You Americans need to back up and let these little countries deal with Russia on their own." And why would those little countries say, "Sorry, Russia, we enjoy a working relationship with the United States because the United States says if we're ever invaded, they will protect us"? And what does Putin say? We're not going to invade anybody. And then what does he do?
Invades.
But if he said he wasn't going to invade, wouldn't he keep his word? That's why he likes treaties with America. Because he signs a treaty, he's not bound to keep it. It's not part of his culture, but we are. By the way, have any of you ever traveled to Russia? Okay, I traveled over there to see my daughter and son-in-law and grandchildren one time when they were over there as missionaries. And here's what happened. In order to go to Russia, I had to get, not only have my passport, but I had to get a visa from the Russian embassy. And here's what it said. When you get to Russia, this is the hotel where you will be living. And I said to my daughter, "But I'll be living with you guys." She goes, "We're not an official place for people to live when they visit Russia. You have to officially say you're staying in one of these hotels." But I never stayed at that hotel. That's just the way it is. And you carry a paper around that says your home base is this hotel. And if the police check with that hotel, what will they tell them? Do you have Tom Bonine registered at your hotel? And what will they say? Yes. Okay. Do I sleep at that hotel? No. Am I breaking the law? Yes. Yes, I am, Anna. And I was bothered by that. But then I realized that's the way things are done in Russia. So anyone who goes there to visit is automatically breaking the law. It's not like it's a major law, like you're stealing government secrets. But if the government wants to arrest you and put you in jail, do they have a reason? So in a sense, everybody breaks some kind of little ordinance that can get you arrested. if they want to. So that means the people who have the power keep the power, and the people who come to visit, you better behave yourself, because if they want to, they can arrest you. It was like I can't believe a country operates like this. But they did. When I was in Ukraine, I said to somebody, why in the world would I have to ask permission from the local government authorities in our town to get on a train, to buy a ticket and go on a train to visit another city? And here's what they said. Because someone has to be in charge of who goes where in this country. And I said, why? And here's what they said. If we didn't have somebody in charge, think about this. What if everybody in town decided to go buy a ticket on the train for the same day to go to some town down the road? It would be chaos. I'm going, when is that ever going to happen? They said, well, but if it did happen, we have to have the government protecting us from that. I said, the government protects us from something that probably that's not going to happen. Well, it doesn't matter. They're still in charge. You understand? That somebody has to sign off on you doing about anything. Okay, the Ottoman Empire, it talks about on page 432, the successor states to the Ottoman Empire. Was the Ottoman Empire a vast empire? Do you know anything about the culture of the Ottoman Empire? What religion was embraced by people in the Ottoman Empire? Anyone know?
Muslim.
Islam. That's exactly right. Islam. A changing, on page 433, a changing world political map. For sure, it's still changing today. I've got this cool thing. I couldn't believe it when I found this. This to me is so interesting. I can't believe we're running out of time. I'm going to have to stay with this book. We are still having arguments with Canada and Mexico about where the border is. There are still arguments about where the border is for Canada and Mexico. And it's some of those that hasn't been settled yet. In fact, just recently, did somebody hear in the news that some American troops were stopped by Mexican troops, and they said they were in America, in the United States, and Mexico said, no, you were in Mexico. And it's because they're operating with different boundary lines. Page 436 talks about instruments of nation building. Among the instruments most often used on page 436, bottom of the left-hand column, are religion. So now understand, have you ever heard somebody say, religion has caused more wars than anything else in the world today? Okay, see, here's what they've misrepresented. The people who want to declare war on a neighboring state, if they have a religious reason for doing it, it'll get more people enthused about what they're doing. You follow me? So religion is used to build the power of a nation state. Religion didn't cause the war. They were going to have a war anyway. They just used religion to recruit people. The armed forces is another thing that's used. What is that? How come so many people in North Korea want to join the armed forces? It's the best job in town. You get food when other people don't. You get benefits when other people don't. What's another way to build a nation? With education. What did we do in the United States to build our culture? we passed a law that said all children must go to school. And in that school, we're going to teach them about the fundamentals of our nation, of what makes us a nation. Do we have any symbols? What's one of our symbols? The flag. What's another one of our symbols? An eagle. What's one of our sports symbols that's truly American?
Football.
Football.
Baseball.
Now, football is all over the world. No, football is all over the world. Football is what?
Soccer.
Is what we call soccer. Football
It's American.
is what we call beat 'em up. Fight a war on the 50-yard line, or the 20 or the 30. So American football, and that's what it's called, isn't it? American football. What's another distinctly American sport? What?
Basketball.
Basketball. Basketball? But it's
Well,
all
they
around
play
the
it
world.
all over.
I know, but it started in basketball. Anyone know where basketball started?
Canada.
Where? KU. It started at Kansas
you not know
University.
that?
What? Well, the person that started in Kansas University was from Canada.
Well, he was from Canada, but he invented it here.
Well, he first started it in a gym in Canada by using a basket on
Are you
top
sure
of
it
a
was
rail.
in Canada?
It was in Canada.
No.
Did
I'm
anybody
gonna
in
look that
Canada?
up.
It was in Ontario, Canada.
Did people in Ontario say this is a marvelous idea?
No.
Ah, so when he got to America, people here said, this is a marvelous idea.
Yes.
So the guy who invented
No,
basketball
it was invented.
came
What?
from Canada. What's another uniquely American sport?
Baseball.
Baseball. Now, you can go other places in the world. England plays what? What do they call that? Cricket.
Croquet.
And you can go croquet. You can go other places where they knock things around. But baseball, as we know it, you know what?
Croquet's fun.
I'm beginning to think that in America, sports is one of our big unifying factors. And then it talks about the media. What media do we have that keeps us cohesive as a nation? Newspapers, television. Don't we call it freedom of the press? The press doesn't have freedom in other parts of the world like we have.
That's true.
Political parties and labor unions. Did you know Poland was one of the first satellite countries to separate from Russia, and it was because of labor union influence. What have labor unions done in the United States? Do any of you have a relative who works in a trade where he belongs to a union? Well, my son-in-law is a sheet metal worker, and he's a member of the Sheet Metal Workers Union. And because he belongs to a union, and because the sheet metal union is so unified, he makes more money than probably twice as much money as he would be earning if he wasn't in a union that did collective bargaining with the people who hire sheet metal workers to do work for them. Well, you're going to have to... Oh, ethnic cleansing on page 440. That is so sad how countries decide just to clean out certain ethnicities. It's called genocide, and they kill people. Well, man. That's it. We'll just have to quit. You'll just have to read it on your own, because we have 2 more chapters to cover next week.
Oh boy.
Have a nice weekend. Oh, man. I can't believe we're skipping all this good stuff.